Okay, I want to show you my setup. As I said, you could use a fence post beside a sidewalk as long as the fence post is vertical in both directions and the sidewalk is flat, level in other words, then this will work. What I've done at my home, and I've done that with a fence post before in town, but at my home what I've got here is a post that I had found in the yard basically, and I drove it in the ground and I tried to make it vertical. And here's my measurement. Hold on a minute. So here is my bubble level, pretty level or plumb in that direction, maybe not perfect but pretty good. And then in this direction, same deal, pretty much plumb. So my pole is vertical, and now I got to make sure that my surface is flat or level, and it's not perfect, but it's good enough for this experiment, this measurement. And I'm also made sure to drive my post in the ground so that the shadow casts out on the sidewalk. Now, if you happen to find a fence post, who knows which direction it'll cast its shadow. But I made sure to drive this post to the south of my driveway because I know the sun will be in the south and it'll cast a shadow onto the north into the driveway. So what you need to do on day one is to come out and mark this shadow. So I got a pencil here. I'm just going to mark this shadow, the tip of the shadow, and I'm going to note the time. For me, it's 12:36. But anyway, get something you can mark on here that will let you mark the time and then note the time. Mark the shadow and note the time. On day one, you just need to come out every 15 minutes or so. Eventually, you're going to be able to find when the shadow is the shortest. I've got a tape measure here. Right now, my shadow is about 25.5 inches long. And I'm going to keep measuring this from about noon local time till about 2 local time every 15 minutes or so. The reason I'm picking noon local time is because we're on daylight savings time, and that would be an hour before the sun is supposed to be the highest at 1 p.m. on savings time. Now, if you're in standard time during the winter time, local noon should be about clock noon, should be about when the sun's directly overhead. Now, that's a little bit flexible for reasons I explained in the written instructions. In fact, China is all on one time zone. So, I mean, you're not anywhere close necessarily to noon being the shortest shadow. So that's why I say give yourself a time span when you can measure the shadow. So I'm going to measure this every 15 minutes. And at some point, it's going to reach the shortest point, probably for me, about 1:30. And whatever my time is, about 1:30, then tomorrow when I come back out, I can start just about 10 minutes before that time and go to about 10 minutes after, because I'm going to be able to get really precise times. So I'm going to start here. Let's say it's tomorrow. I'm going to start here measuring my shadow, and let's assume that this is really close to the shortest shadow time. I'm going to start measuring my shadow, and you can see I've already now got a difference between the first mark and the actual shadow now. So you can see I'm not at noon yet because my shadow keeps getting shorter. Now, once I pass solar noon for my location, my shadow is going to start getting longer again. But right now, my shadow has already gone from 25.5 inches to about 24 3/4, 25 inches. So I'm getting shorter. But anyway, assume this is tomorrow and we are really close to the shortest shadow time. Then I'm going to mark it carefully. All right, this is now 12:38. Keep marking that. And again, my pencil is not writing very good here, but keep marking this shadow and noting the time. You might have to use a Sharpie or something like that. Then once you have the exact time of the shortest shadow, you can stop and note that time. Now, you won't know necessarily until you go beyond that a few marks, because then the marks will start getting longer, the shadows start getting longer. But at the shortest shadow, that's the local apparent solar noon. And at that point, you can measure your shadow length. You can measure the height of your vertical object all the way up. And you can do some geometry. And you can determine the angle of the sun. And that's going to let you know, using the precise time, your latitude, using a formula in the instructions, and your longitude.